Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
You're in the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
So, we've made a change in this episode. For those of you who get the announcements from email from our forums, we were going to have our old friend Miguel, who's known as Red Pill Junkie, join us, but he had to cancel at the last minute, and he will be rescheduled in the very, very near future. He's a close friend of the show, and we look forward to talking with him. So I contacted Tim Swartz and said, we gotta get something done. And he found us a really fascinating guest. Her name is Tillie Treadwell, and she and I share something with Tim, and that is contributors to the Weird Time book, which is just shipping. So we all look forward to that. I got my first look at the book, and I see that you did include my chapter, which some people may regard, Tim, as a strange decision, but I'll accept it.
Of course, it wouldn't be a Zontar Press book if it doesn't have a chapter from Gene.
Ah, yes, Zontar. I have to ask you, Tim, what is the meaning of the word Zontar other than some extraterrestrial being from something or other?
Zontar is the name of an extraterrestrial being, like you said, like Zontar, the thing from Venus. And it was a very bad movie made by a Texas filmmaker by the name of Larry Buchanan, who had been hired by American International Studios to produce a handful of movies that would be released to television stations alongside of American International's theater-released movies, that they had bundled them all together for a television package. You know, the ones that would play like on late Friday or Saturday nights with the horror film host. And I just always like that name, Zontar, the thing from Venus. It's just so kitschy and just perfectly emulates the type of books that we like to produce.
I'm afraid to say something, but I will anyway. I know that I used to watch when I was a mere lad. I used to watch all these shows on Saturday morning where they had Space Patrol and Tom Corbett, Space Cadet, Rocky Jones, Space Ranger. And then they had an echo, Space Ranger, Space Ranger. And like that. And then during the week we had, this is really before you were born, Tim, and certainly Tillie is a much younger person, years before you were born, Captain Video and his Video Rangers. This was on the original DuPont network, and DuPont died with very little announcement to the outside world, and Captain Video no longer worked at his secret laboratory to fight evildoers around the galaxy. So that's where that comes from. So Zontar is very much the kind of name of an evil alien that they would use in those TV shows.
Exactly. SCTV, Second City Television, did an entire episode sort of based on on that, where Zontar, the thing from Venus, actually took over the satellite and the entire network in order to perpetrate his evil deeds on the planet.
It's like I'm hearing that announcement on all the radio and TV outlets from a 1950s movie, People of Earth, Attention, People of Earth, Attention. And if you remember, that was what was said in the movie Earth versus the Flying Saucers.
Yep, that's right. But it was John Candy this time around playing Zontar. So,
well, serves him right.
Sadly, I must be a little bit too young to catch all these references, but I'm learning something new. Thanks for educating me, boys.
I wanted to ask you about something. You've got a chapter in the Weird Time book, and you have several subtitles for your chapter that I need to ask you about. Maybe we can introduce you to our show this way. I will read the 3 titles. This is subtitles to the book. Nutty is a Squirrel, Blowing Bubbles, which I thought like a song, I'm Forever Blowing Bubbles, To Herb or Not to Herb? And I was going to respond, that is the question. But I didn't. But just that alone, you wrote about, of course, things like the Mandela Effect.
Uh-huh.
And I thought you mentioned 5 instances here that I guess refer to the Mandela issue, which, of course, Nelson Mandela. The actor Rip Torn, as you'll remember, he was the boss in the first 2 of the Men in Black movies. Gene Wilder, whom we all remember from such movies as Blazing Saddles and Young Frankenstein. Gilbert Gottfried, who was really a terrific comedian who left before his time. Elvis. Kurt or Kirk Cobain. Okay. Let's just talk about that, the Mandela Effect. What do we know about it, and do you think it's something real?
Absolutely. Well, I do believe it is something real, and I seem to have experienced it almost my entire life. I talk about my own experiences in the book, and I'd be more than happy to share those if it would be desired. But perhaps I digress. I think that the Mandela Effect is real in some cases, and I think that it is just mistaken processing by the brain in other situations. I think that every case is different. Does that make sense?
Okay, so it's my fault or your fault.
It might be, but I do think that we as incarnate beings are often shifting timelines, and we don't know it, except for, my favorite washcloth isn't red anymore. It's blue. Little hints like that.
I'll give you one instance where I had a situation like that. I don't really use reading glasses anymore that much after I had cataract surgery, which is more complicated. It's like they replace the lens in your eye with a laser or something. It takes like 5 minutes to do, and suddenly your eyesight is very different. I remember placing my reading glasses in front of my color printer, which is to the left of me on a separate table. And to visualize the table, if any of you are old enough to remember the original Apple LaserWriter printer, which is not what I have now, you'll recognize this table that was made exclusively for it. So I put my reading glasses there, and then I go back to retrieve them. Hours later, I forgot to pick up my reading glasses. They're gone. They're gone. And I never did figure out what could have happened to those reading glasses until something happened. So first I wondered if I had put them somewhere else, and I had checked. Now, there's nobody in the house who would move my reading glasses. My wife wouldn't touch any of my computing things. She'll move things around, but nothing into the section of the home where we have a home office. Never touch it. My son is in Spain, so I don't think he could do anything except with psychic powers. And we can get into that in another discussion. So I put up with this. I got a second set in the drawer somewhere, and I used that. Maybe a day or two later, I look back at the printer. My reading glasses are back.
Yeah. Yeah, I hear that type of story all the time from people that I am in contact with. And when I was a professional paranormal investigator and a paranormal counselor, I would always advise people that it could be several things. It could be poltergeist type activity, it could be a fairy spirit or something or someone like that, or it could be that you're switching timelines. And in this timeline, the glasses are gone, and then in the next timeline, they were back on the table. It's so mysterious and slippery, this type of situation. And it really is, at least in my opinion, a complete enigma. But what do you think about all of those different possibilities, Gene and Tim?
We'll answer on the other side with Tillie, Gene, and Tim. You're in
The Paracast.
This podcast is sponsored by Monarch Money. Are you saving to reach your financial goals? Reaching those goals isn't just about getting more money, but by managing what you have. And the best way to manage your money? Monarch Money. Monarch Money is a new kind of finance app that's intuitive, powerful, ad-free, and takes the headaches out of budgeting. Try it free when you go to monarchmoney.com/podcast. Monarch puts all your accounts, investments, transactions, and finances at your fingertips. With a complete view of your finances, you'll gain insights on your spending and find new ways to save. Plus, Monarch lets you customize your dashboard, collaborate with your partner, set custom budgets and goals, and track your progress toward them. See why Mint users are turning to Monarch Money and loving it, and why the Wall Street Journal named Monarch Money the best budgeting app overall. Get a 30-day free trial when you go to monarchmoney.com/podcast. That's MONARCH money.com/podcast for your free trial. monarchmoney.com/podcast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
We'd like to hear from you. If you have a comment or question about the Paracast, send it to news@theparacast.com. That's news@theparacast.com. And don't forget to visit our famous Paracast community forums at forum.theparacast.com.
Tillie Treadwell asks us what we think about shifting time, the strange effects of my reading glasses appearing, disappearing, etc. That might also explain the shifting timelines, the fact that you put two people together in one room, they will report totally different things. They're existing in different realities.
This is why I personally contend that reality and even time is not purely objective, nor is it purely subjective. I believe that it is a blend of the two, and that particular blend depends upon the individual and the individuals involved. And that, of course, depends upon who is interacting with whom at what point and how much they are paying attention. Does that make sense, perhaps?
Well, you're certainly in the political world. We have multiple realities, but I kind of think that's more about individual viewpoints and perceptions, not reality.
Well, I would like to tell you a story then. My husband and I were driving food deliveries one night recently, and we were on our way to a pickup from a restaurant. We drove by a person who was sitting in a green foldable chair, and they had a tent set up, like this was their little home, on the side of the road. When we drove by, I saw a woman complete with the female chest, really long gray hair, and she was smoking a cigarette. My husband, however, he saw an older person just like me, but the person that he saw was clearly a male who had shorter gray hair and who was drinking a beer in that chair. What really, or who really was there? It seems like it somewhat depended, but the core reality at minimum was that there was an elderly person with gray hair holding something and sitting in that same green chair. Maybe that's the best answer that I can give. I do hope that helps at least a little bit, though. Just perhaps like time itself, sometimes the way I see things might be a little slippery.
This might be a strange relationship then. Do you and your husband frequently experience different realities?
Okay. No, we don't seem to experience different realities. And in fact, even with the paranormal experiences that we've had, we come away describing almost the exact same thing, seemingly every time.
Except for this one instance.
Correct.
So, what do you think? I mean, do you think that you saw the possibility of two closely interacting timelines, or maybe this person wasn't quite human, and you
Right.
saw what you wanted to see, and your husband saw what he wanted to see?
I honestly think that it could be either or that it could be something else entirely subconscious on my end and my husband's. I'm not really sure. I don't claim to know, although I have to say I would love to know, and so would he, because that encounter has been driving us bonkers ever since.
How
It's
long
too bad
ago
you didn't
did
drive.
that, excuse me, how long ago did it occur?
Oh, that was just last month.
This the first time you had that kind of thing?
It is. Hmm. Yes, sir. Usually when we have events, we seem to experience nearly the same exact thing, except I did have a spookier experience. Perhaps that's for another time, though, where it seemed that we each were targeted to experience something completely different and separate from the other. I don't know that this was one of those cases. I suspect that it was more either a passive non-human encounter or completely separate experiences of timeline realities, like Tim was recommending it could be, and that's the best that I have as far as insights with this one goes. I just like to use it now as an example for timeline differences and how one bubble of reality for one person may or may not match up with another person, even if you're sitting beside each other 2 feet away in the car.
If you want to talk about that instance, we've got plenty of time, and I think our audience would enjoy hearing it if you want to tell it.
Sure. I just wasn't sure if it would be or not with this topic that we have going on here tonight.
Hey, go for it.
Is that okay with you, Gene?
I'm giving you a requisition, yes.
Okay, fair enough. All right, so the incident that I am about to describe to you is, I promise you, at least as far as I know, 100% real. It is also one of the most intimidating and frightening paranormal encounters with a non-human person that I've ever had. It also has encouraged me to, in some ways anyway, join forces with the beloved Mr. Steve Mara and Barry Fitzgerald over at Project Doorway, where these gentlemen talk about strange quantum science and dark non-human people visiting the human race. At any rate, jumping into the story, to set the scene, it was my husband and I. This was around Valentine's Day a few years ago. We had decided to have a date night and then come home and enjoy some hookah together. For anyone who may not know, hookah is a type of shisha, and it is widely smoked for pleasure and for ritual in the Middle East, as well as now here in the States.
So, as most of our listeners know, I am not well attuned to smoking things, especially smoking things that are not so conventional. So, here's the dumb question I'm going to ask. Is this an intoxicant kind of thing or what?
I was getting there, my friend. Yes, you are correct. It is technically tobacco.
Okay.
Which is an intoxicant.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And if anyone, most people may not know, but in the paranormal realm, it is said that smoking tobacco, drinking alcohol can encourage certain paranormal events. I have come over the years to agree. And during this evening, I did not expect anything to happen. I thought that no one was watching. Well, he and I put on some Indian music. We enjoyed the hookah, and at about 2:30 a.m., we decided that it was bedtime. So we turned out the lights, we put aside the hookah, made sure everything was fireproof and calm. My husband had been, he said, starting to fall asleep, and I was still a little bit more awake. But then suddenly, and you could say my third eye, but then traveling forward to behind my eyelids, I saw emerging from the darkness a large blue-headed person. Definitely more masculine energy, but no sex was revealed to me. So I flipped between calling that person him and it.
We have to do our break now, Tillie, right in the middle of your story, so we will continue it on the other side. Tillie Treadwell making her first appearance on the Paracast, one of the authors of Weird Time with me and Tim. You're in
The Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
Hi, this is Bryce Abel. I'm the producer of Dark Skies, the co-author of AD After Disclosure, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Tillie, you're telling us a strange story here, and we had to interrupt you as things go. Please proceed.
Indeed, and thank you very much, sir. Well, the person came forth from the dark of space, seemingly, or another dimension. Who really can say, right? He appeared to me behind my eyelids as a large blue-headed person with massive almond-shaped, highly tilted black eyes, very small nose, very small mouth. And he introduced himself to me as being the being that Aleister Crowley had run into in Egypt, and as being one of the people, the non-human people, that had manifested during the Skull events, which Steve Mera was heavily involved in. And he introduced himself as a few other titles, which I'd prefer not to go there, but he claimed to be all of these beings throughout history for humankind. And he asked me if I would join forces with him in essentially destroying humankind from the inside out. And of course, I said no. Before I had the chance to reject his advance, he had asked me permission to start manifesting physically in our bedroom, to talk to me physically, face to face on this plane. I've never had any kind of interaction like this before, nor have I ever had any non-human being like this try to recruit me. And it was the strangest thing I've ever encountered. I have seen a lot of things over my lifetime and over my years, but this frightened me so much that I sat bolt right up in bed. I was immediately awake. I shook my husband. He was having a very difficult time coming to. And when he did, he told me that he felt as though he was put into a trance a few minutes beforehand, before I had woken him. And he said that it was a deep, soothing, ethereal type of trance that made him feel like everything was perfectly fine and well. And he likened it to the bliss state that he had gotten after taking ayahuasca once. For that morning, I turned on all of the lights in the house. I burned sage, incense. I made sure that I spent a lot of time cleaning and cleansing the room in a multitude of ways. I made sure to spend a lot of time expressing out to the universe, as it were, that that person or being was not welcome to approach me anymore, and asking for assistance in keeping that person and that type of person away. But yeah, that's one of the weirdest encounters I've ever had, and it convinced me that Steve Mera in the Skull events and Aleister Crowley may have been telling the truth about some of these encounters. There you have it.
When did you first in your life start to have weird encounters?
Well, my very first weird encounter was when I was in the cradle, believe it or not. So I'm diagnosed as being highly neurodivergent, and I have a diagnosis that's very, very similar to autism, but not quite. They don't quite know how to categorize it. So general autism, you could say. People with my diagnosis are known to have memory that goes back even to infancy, and that seems to be the case with me. My first paranormal encounter, as I remember, was when I was probably around 6 months old. I was in one of those portable baby carriers that people would use to strap into the car for safety. And I was in the carrier laying in one of my family members' kitchens. And I was happy just looking up at the ceiling fan. I promise you I'm not moving off of my mic. It is, for some reason, my tablet.
Okay. Go ahead.
Okay. I was pulled out of my body instantaneously, and there was a giant moon woman who was holding me, and she was thanking me for coming here and asking if there was anything that she could do for me. And I remember having the consciousness essentially that I do now, but not the understanding of what was going on. I began to cry and was terribly upset and afraid because of how huge she was compared to me. And then all of a sudden I was back down in my body and could not be consoled for quite a long time. I remember crying myself to sleep out of fear and confusion. That was my very first encounter. Have you ever had any strange encounters yourself?
Well, just to answer your question about past memories of one's childhood, I remember lying in the crib. I remember being very unhappy. I remember voices in the other room, which I did not understand. That's the one and only memory of me being a small child. Otherwise, one could say I was never a small child. I was something, but we haven't figured that out yet. Yeah, that's interesting. Now, the interesting question here is, did you remember this all along, all through the years, or is this something that came back to you later?
Sure. I think that's a great question. I have remembered it my whole life. It was such an obscure and bizarre memory, but I think those are the factors that have made it long-standing within my memory.
Okay, when was the next thing, the next incident that you remembered?
Sure. Well, there were a few. I want to say between the ages of about 2 and 5 or 2 and 6, it seemed to me that I had a lot of things happening around me. I would be in the backyard, for example, and I would see small people sometimes, be out at the park with my grandmother, and I would see what I would now call little earth fairies gathering roots and going about their business in the little woods next to the park. I started seeing things change around me on the face of a Roman numeral clock. And I had an encounter with what I would have considered to be the tooth fairy. At least when I was little, that's what I thought it was. But it was a strange floating light in the middle of my room after I had lost a tooth. So I don't know what it is, but I called it a tooth fairy. And there were plenty of true encounters that I could regale you with, but we'd be here all night.
Well, maybe not all of them, but just a curious question here, which is, did your parents, as you recall, talk about the tooth fairy when one of your baby teeth was lost?
Yeah, they did. That could have played into it somehow or another.
So you would accept the possibility this was your imagination working overtime?
Quite possibly. I accept that it could have heavily influenced the encounter and that it might have helped my little child brain create it. I don't know, and I don't really claim to know, if that makes sense.
Well, I'll go with that. I remember at one time thinking I could talk to the raindrops. I hear the sound of rain, and I think at that point, I must have been like between 5 and 10 years old. I'd be talking to them. Of course, they didn't put me away. Some people think that's what they should have done next, but they let me live the way I was, and here I am today, 1,000 years later. Tillie, Gene, Tim, you're in
The Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
Hi, this is James Fox, Director of the Phenomenon and Moment of Contact. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
But we don't want to get into our past, because if you get into my past, you would probably turn off the radio or whatever device you're listening to this on. Tillie Treadwell joins us. She is a contributor to this new book from Sean Castile and Tim Swartz called Weird Time. Every time, by the way, that's said, to say the words weird time, your voice will actually say weird time. You know, I don't want to start sounding like Darth Vader. You know, when I talk to my son, I always tell him, I am your father. I do that to him sometimes, and of course, that's why he turned me off, and he moved to Spain as a result. Let's talk about the Mandela Effect, which is, of course, that people distinctly remember certain events, and it turns out that's not what happened. I'm thinking of Jaws' girlfriend in the James Bond movies. We had this character, Jaws, played by a really, really wonderful actor, Richard Kiel. You know, he's like a 7-foot-tall kind of guy, really nice, gentle guy who plays this villain, but people kind of fell in love with the character. So he came back for another James Bond movie, and he met a girlfriend. And some people swear, I don't know if you do or not, or you swear at the movie. I don't know if you saw it, Tillie. Supposedly his girlfriend had the same metallic teeth as he did. But it turns out she didn't.
Yeah. I know precisely what you were referring to because, well, that's actually a movie that I saw when I was younger. And I remember her having braces.
Exactly. But in reality, she didn't, which is really crazy.
That blows me away because this could then represent the fact that in general, even physical media is subject to change. So the original tapes may have changed, and then the DVDs that they were on, et cetera, et cetera. I just find that so fascinating, if that's the case.
It's also true, by the way, and a real fact, that when movies are released in other mediums, they often have a director's cut. They add footage that wasn't there, like in the original Superman, the movie from 1978. There's a scene where the young Clark Kent is running past a speeding train. In the speeding train are 3 people. One of them represents the mother of Lois Lane. The young girl is Lois Lane. Her mother is played by Noel Neill, who played Lois Lane in the Superman serials and on the TV show Adventures of Superman. The father is played by Kirk Allen, who played Superman in the 2 movie serials, Superman Adam Man versus Superman, where we are introduced to Luthor. So that is not in the original theatrical cut. They took it out because they wanted to keep the timing down, but you do see it in the director's cut. So that's where it was filmed. That's where there were differences. In terms of making a major motion picture, there are lots of scenes that will disappear on the cutting room floor. And I guess you're able to sell the version online or from a Blu-ray DVD or something by saying you now have missing scenes. Even though as a practical matter, those missing scenes may not do anything, you still have the missing scenes. So it's possible here, and we'd have to hear from the producers or check online, that there are alternate versions of these James Bond movies where certain scenes are put in there. And then they take them out and they say, look what the public's going to think about that. This is a cool shtick. I don't think that's what happened. I just think that people remember it differently, or maybe thought that it would be ideal that she should have had those metallic braces. I don't know. Let's get to, of course, the famous Nelson Mandela instance. Tell us about that.
Absolutely. And Tim, I'd like to know too, do you remember her having braces or not?
Yes, absolutely. She had braces. That's what helped attract him to her. It was after he had fallen out of, I think it was an airplane, and crashed through the roof of a barn. He came out and was like brushing himself off, and then she showed up and kind of helped him. She's like a farm girl. Yeah. And she smiled at him, and she was worried, like she had a mouthful of braces.
Yeah, that's what I remember. Okay. Yep, I just wanted to check. But as far as Nelson Mandela goes, a lot of people, myself included, were taught that he passed away in prison in, I believe it was July of 1991. So that's my memory. And I can still to this day remember learning about that in high school. And I remember seeing that the textbook had photocopies of the obituaries and different facts about the funeral service and things of that nature. But it turns out that he actually went on to live quite a while longer. And apparently, there are people who remember him dying 2 or 3 different times. So for me, I remember him dying now twice. Once in 2013, I believe it was, and then once at my original timeline, I guess, 1991. But the Mandela Effect is named so by Fiona Broom, who was at a convention, as I recall, in 2009. She had been having casual conversation with other convention guests discussing Mandela and lots of other historical happenings, and discovered that a lot of people had different memories about him passing away back in 1991, etc. So this is why it's called the Mandela Effect.
Let's move to that second one that you have listed there in the chapter, and that is the actor Rip Torn. I'm not aware of this. I remember him being in a number of films. I think he was a cousin of Sissy Spacek, by the way. His first name, real name was Elmore, I think. Rip Torn. So anyway, Rip Torn, what is there about Rip Torn?
Sure. There are a few, I'm told, and please forgive me, but I listed all of those different famous Mandela effects, but I don't know a ton of celebrity gossip and life details myself, so I don't quite remember the details of that. I do apologize.
Gene Wilder. Of course, we remember him from Young Frankenstein, that's Frankenstein, and of course, from Blazing Saddles. Do you remember what Mandela Effect was involved with him?
Sure. Well, this was another one where there were a few of them. I had remembered him dying much earlier in years past, but being involved with the paranormal the way that I am, I get lots of different reports and comments from lots of different people and lots of different sources. I've been told that he passed away in like 1980. Some people have told me that he died in the early 1990s, and some people said that he just died like last year. So I included that one specifically because of how many different reports about him that I have received over the years. And given that I don't remember all of the details that I had put into the book regarding these famous people's lives, just because I get so many different takes on their lives and their deaths and possible relation to the Mandela Effect, that I admit sometimes it kind of mixes up in my mind a little bit.
Well, let me look at the official news here. The official word is Gene Wilder, born in 1933 in Milwaukee, died at the age of 83 in Stamford, Connecticut on August 29th, 2016. So all the information you had was evidently not the official version.
Mm-hmm. That's often how it seems to go with these Mandela effects.
I'm going to give you some other interesting effects in our next segment, by the way. I'll just mention one thing in terms of deaths. A rock musician, composer, singer, songwriter named Doug Engel died recently. He was the lead singer and writer of a song called Inagata da Vida for Iron Butterfly, which was a 17-minute, 2-second song that was popular in the late 60s. Now, he died recently, and the only distinctive thing about it is not the Mandela Effect, that we shared a birthday, same day, same year. And look at me and look at him. Of course, I've outlived him now, but he probably made a lot more money than I have. We have Tillie, Gene, Tim, you're in
The Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
Hey, this is Marie D. Jones, the author of This Book is from the Future, and you are listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
With Tillie Treadwell, we're exploring the Mandela Effect. I should put echoes around that. The Mandela Effect, beep, 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 or something. Or Mandela Effect. Gilbert Gottfried was, of course, I heard his distinctive voice in lots of TV shows, comedy routines. The commercial for this insurance company, Aflac, he'd go, Aflac. Okay, they got, but at one time he said something wrong and they fired him and they had to have another actor do it. Gilbert Gottfried, where does the Mandela Effect involve him?
Wow, he really was iconic, and I still think he's rather iconic to this day. I'm impressed with his career and his reputation largely. Bravo to him, and what a distinctive voice. As far as his connection to the Mandela Effect go, like most of these that I have listed in the book, it revolves around deaths, with the, I think, exception of one person who had a different name spelling according to lots of different sources, but of course we'll get into that later. This is simply another one where I've gotten different reports about apparently when he died, when he did not, and everyone that I've known who has come to me for help seems to have a different take on these celebrities' death dates. I can't put any official stamp of death on him or make any claims about him myself, because I admit that I don't know much about him otherwise. These cases that I've included are just purely from what I keep hearing from other people and what I remember myself in passing.
I'll tell you, Tillie, one for me was Harvey Fierstein. I distinctly remember, and this has been, a few years ago, pre-pandemic. I date everything now by that stuff that happened, before or after the pandemic. But I distinctly remember reading that Harvey Fierstein had passed away from throat cancer.
Oh.
And I was like, well, that made sense the way that he always sounded. And for several years, I thought that was true until, nope, he's alive.
Yep.
Now, did I just, read an erroneous report? Or, was I looking at The Onion or something and not realizing it? But yeah, I was positive that Harvey Fierstein was dead until he was not.
Yeah. I've heard a lot of people say the same thing on Reddit about Betty White. God rest her soul.
Of course, Betty White was like 300 years old when she died.
Yes, but I've heard a lot of people on Reddit say that they remember her passing away somewhere in the early 2000s, and then other people are saying, no, she's alive, and then she just passed away apparently at 99 pretty recently.
Okay, Harvey Fierstein. Officially, he's still alive.
Yep.
Officially, he's 69 years old, born in 1954 in Brooklyn, New York. Officially, he's still around.
Tim, do you remember any?
Yeah, this.
Do you remember any news articles or broadcasts or anything that had announced his passing?
Nope, this was something that I had read. Like an obituary. But yeah, I mean, it was one of these situations. You read something like that and it's been like, oh, that's too bad. I always liked him. And, then, you go on with your life until, like I said, until that time he was dead until he wasn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So there is a woman on YouTube that I just love to watch. Her name is Eva, and her channel is called Once Upon a Timeline. All she does is talk about Mandela Effect changes that she records personally or that people close to her report, and or things that are changing on the news, that type of thing. And she talks about this type of thing pretty frequently, about celebrities or people being dead, even somewhat close to her, and then all of a sudden being alive and well the very next day or week or month or year. Apparently it's a thing.
Speaking of things, Elvis, is there a Mandela Effect issue with the death of Elvis?
Well, that one gets a little bit more complicated because some people say that he died at different times or was still alive at different times, sure. But I know that we can't get too graphic here on this show. I'll try to be polite about it. There are lots of people who remember him passing away in some pretty undignified manners, and they swear that it was all public record and it was spoken about on the news. But then other people say that he simply had a heart attack and died. And even myself, I've had to do research on Elvis a few times over the last 10 years for different projects. And even I have come across different official sources saying that he passed away in different ways and at different times.
The official word again is 1977 at Graceland, at his home. So yeah, what can I say about that? There were also strange rumors about the death of Jim Morrison of the band The Doors at the age of 27 in France. Now, 27 is the day, a legendary day for the death of rock musicians like Brian Jones from the Rolling Stones, of course. We're going to mention another one in a few minutes. 27, the 27-year curse for rock and roll singers. And you have all these people, Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Kurt Cobain. Now, is there something weird about that one?
Oh, there's plenty weird about that one. Well, depending upon who you ask, of course. However, from what I've been able to garner, apparently he died at different ages like all the others, but 27 seems to be the most popular in this set of timeline or reality, whatever you'd like to call it. And even I myself have very, very vivid memories of him being named Kurt Cobain. And it has flip-flopped over the years for me between Kurt and Kirk. And I'm talking about seeing his name in books and textbooks and news articles and specials on YouTube and on TV. It has flip-flopped. Even sometimes I myself have gone back to watch certain videos, professionally made videos on YouTube or other news sources about the guy. And I will watch the same video, go back to it 6 months later, and it will say the very opposite name as what it has said before. Isn't that a kicker?
There's a number of others I wasn't aware of, like Anton Yelchin, who played Chekhov in the new version of Star Trek. Robert Johnson, a famous singer from the early part of the century. Alan Wilson, you haven't heard of him, but you might have heard of the band he fronted called Canned Heat.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
And Canned Heat, by the way, appeared in Woodstock. One song I remember from their collection was On the Road Again. Another one, yeah. Going up the country, that kind of thing. That was Alan Wilson from Canned Heat. I mean, there's more here than I believe. Of course, we mentioned Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, Jim Morrison. Ronald McKiernan was another person they mentioned. Dave Alexander, a bassist from a band called the Stooges. Pete Ham. Remember Pete Ham? He was the lead singer and songwriter for a group that was associated with the Beatles. Okay.
Oh, wow.
Okay. Badfinger. You know, if you want it, here it is, come and get it, that kind of thing. We got more to come on. We're now in the 27 Club. We'll get into more of this in a moment. Gene, Tim, Tillie, you're in
The Paracast.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Welcome back to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio. And now, here's Gene Steinberg.
I'm going to mention a little bit more of the 27 Club, Tillie, before we go on to other subjects. Pete Ham, like I said, but the band Badfinger was very, very troubled. Okay? Very, very troubled band. And they did some really good songs. I think part of it also is they were ripped off by their management, which is not unusual in the recording business. So we can have a list. Chris Bell from a band called Big Star, I guess there it is right here. I'm looking for other names that I recognize, a whole bunch here. There's so many of these 27-year legends. What was it, Amy Winehouse?
I think so, yeah.
I mean, I mentioned Anton Yelchin with a weird accident. And, you know, they, in the next Star Trek Kelvin timeline movie, they honored his passing. They observed it. But this is so weird. Of course, I think there are lots of ages where famous people died. It's just 27. It's like you haven't even started living. You may have achieved a certain level of fame or a high level of fame, and you never get to the next step.
Yeah, I agree. And I think perhaps in a way it is tragic because according to what I have read and understood from modern day scientists, human beings' brains only really are developed at 25 to 26 years old. So quite literally, these guys passing away at 27, they were just getting started with their adult life.
That explains what happened to me when I was 27. That explains a lot. It sounds like a song from Frank Sinatra, When I Was 17, is the way he starts it. It was a very good year. When I was 27, that was an interesting year. I'll tell you, so many things happened there. I'm not going to tell you about it. It's possible, of course, that I died when I was 27, and now I am in an alternate reality. I'll never tell.
And we may never be able to tell either, Gene. It might be a mystery until you pass away and maybe can see your whole lifetime from above. Is that the beauty or the tragedy about life? I guess we'll never know.
Assuming there's an above to travel to, we can get into that. I had another nutty theory about death, and we'll get back to time travel and stuff in a moment. Another crazy theory, which is that when you die, you do not remember dying, you remember going on, but you're now in a different dimension. So in the dimension in which you were alive, they are mourning your death or celebrating it, depending on their point of view. Whereas we are going on, I guess, until we get very old and we are decrepit. Now, I'm not decrepit yet, although some people may think otherwise. Some people think I was decrepit at 17, which was a very good year.
Oh, man. Did you peak at 17, Gene?
It's funny. I was a slightly overweight teenager, like 40, 50 pounds overweight, which is at 6'2", maybe slightly overweight. And then between 17 and 18, I engaged in a major exercise program, riding a bike an incredible amount of distances, weightlifting, watching my diet. And by the time I was 18, I weighed 190, not 250. I lost 60 pounds. Today, I weigh about 180.
Wow.
So, yeah, well, I kept the weight off. And now that I'm the same age as the lead singer of Iron Butterfly, do you remember the band Iron Butterfly, Tillie? Inagata de Vida? You don't?
I don't personally. Do you, Tim?
Oh, of course.
The legend of that, there are two legends about that song. Number one is the original title was In the Garden of Eden, but because Doug Engel was drunk, falling down drunk, when he sang the song, his band member wrote it down as In the Garden of Vida rather than In the Garden of Eden. That's number one thing. It took 17 minutes and 2 seconds because they were doing some kind of extended cut, just kind of working out while they were supposedly setting up the levels in the recording studio, except that the engineer kept the tape rolling. And that particular song with all the breaks, was recorded, and that became one side of their album. And now the third legend here, I've had a couple of them there, is that there's a drum solo, a very distinctive drum solo, in the middle of Inagata de Vida that Ringo Starr says he copied or emulated when he did his solo for The End in the Abbey Road album.
It looks like I need to brush up on my music history.
There is a character, by the way, on YouTube, a guy named Adam Reeder, who calls himself Professor of Rock. And he knows everything.
Yes, I love him. I watch his videos.
I've seen Adam interview rock stars. He interviewed Brian Wilson before he became sick. Interview rock stars, and he remembers more about their careers than they do.
I'm not surprised.
Yes, Professor of Rock on YouTube. I recommend it highly, even if you're not into the music from the 60s, 70s, and 80s as he covers. You learn about all these artists and how they influence music. And a lot of times what you see is they do a song in the 60s and 70s and 80s, and they keep using it for commercials and movies and TV shows. So it goes on. It goes on and on. Like there was a song called Moni Moni from Tommy James and the Shondells. And then Billy Idol did a version of it like 20 years later. So, of course, Tommy James, being the lead author of the song, gets the royalties for that. But then the secret behind that song is something that you'll learn by Professor of Rock, which is that, what does Moni Moni mean? Well, when they were writing that song, they were in New York City. And they were looking for a title or something, and they saw this sign for a bank called Mutual of New York, M-O-N-Y, Moni Moni.
Oh, geez. Oh, that's awesome. I had no idea. I've not seen that video from him. But yes, I do think that if you are a lover of history and you enjoy hearing people's stories, especially from the vintage era, as we would call it now, please do check out the Professor of Rock on YouTube. He is incredible, in my opinion, and he has taught me so very much that otherwise I would know absolutely nothing about. By the way, none of us are sponsored by him. We're not affiliated in any way. We just really like him.
The thing about it also, though, is he doesn't always just give you positive views.
True.
Where the band did negative things like, of course, all the soap opera antics with Fleetwood Mac. He reveals that. The drug problems that some of them had, they were all on everything in the world when they were doing all their famous albums like Rumors and all that. They were taking things that you and I couldn't begin to imagine. At least I don't think I could. I mean, I had my 60s and 70s things going, but nothing like these people. As talented as they were, they did some crazy stuff. And it's lucky they're still around to entertain us in one way or another, except for, of course, Christine McVie died several years ago. And she was the quieter one. I think she was the one who seemed to be more normal than all the rest. And it's very sad that she died, which pretty much killed the band. I don't know why we're talking about this on a paranormal radio show, except that rock stars in general have favored things in the paranormal field. And I'll give you an example of that. Members of Nirvana, after Kurt Cobain died, came together and formed a band called Foo Fighters. Okay? Now, Foo Fighters identifies a specific kind of phenomenon, a UFO-related phenomenon in World War II, Foo Fighters. And you think, well, was it just something that they made up, that Dave Grohl and the rest of his bandmates made up? Or was there another distinctive thing? The record label on which they record was named Roswell.
Oh.
For Foo Fighters. And I would love someone to interview them, and they never do, about the UFO paranormal connection, because a lot of these artists have it. More coming with Tillie, Jean, Tim. You're in
The Paracast.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
This is the story of the one. As a maintenance engineer, he hears things differently. To the untrained ear, everything on his shop floor might sound fine, but he can hear gears grinding or a belt slipping. So he steps in to fix the problem at hand before it gets out of hand. And he knows Grainger's got the right product he needs to get the job done, which is music to his ears. Call, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is Jacques Vallée. You're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
Before we go back to time travel, let me throw some more rock connections. Creedence Clearwater Revival, of course, John Fogerty, did a song about UFOs. We have Jimi Hendrix, Up from the Skies. We had a band called Klaatu. That's the name of the character in Day the Earth Stood Still. Mm-hmm. And there's a song from Klaatu called Calling Occupants of Interplanetary Craft. All right? And the other side note here is that one of the people who sang it was Karen Carpenter.
Oh.
They had an album called Passage, where they were exploring different musical genres, I guess, calling occupants of interplanetary craft. So they were doing the same thing. Of course, Styx did a song, Come Sail Away.
I actually know that one.
Right. Of course, Dennis DeYoung, who I think was the main writer and lead singer, he's a wacky guy. He talks like a street kid from Chicago. If you ever see him interviewed, it's really fun to talk to this guy. I'd love to interview him and see if there was any UFO connection. Tommy James and the Shondells, he was always interested in UFOs. He mentioned that on an all-night show like in the 60s or 70s, but no one ever asks him about that. Oh, he's a crazy drug-filled rock star. Let's not hear about it. So we know about that. But yeah, rock music. We had a guy on the Paracast long time ago, and he was a founding member of Blondie.
Oh, wow.
Founding member. His real name was Gary Lockman. And of course, he called himself Gary Valentine. He was a founding member of Blondie, and then he left the band. So when they were receiving the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame award, Debbie Harry, the leader of the band, would not let him come on stage because he left the band. He dared to leave the band because they were famous. But we had him on the Paracast back in 2016 when Chris O'Brien was my co-host, and he talked about not so much that, but about consciousness and culture and inner tradition and things like that. Gary Lockman, again, people in music are very attuned to the paranormal and UFOs. And then one of the former members of, I can't think of the band's name right now, because the lead guitarist who played with Michael Jackson, you know what I'm talking about, right? He played
I'm sure. Mm-hmm.
Right. He played on, I think, Beat It.
Yeah.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. He died, but one of the people who was in the band for a while, and that was Sammy Hagar, was a UFO abductee.
Really? Oh, that's interesting.
That, by the way, was Van Halen. So Eddie Van Halen's the guy who died. He played on a number of other recordings, especially with Michael Jackson. And that singer, Sammy Hagar, was not the original lead singer. That, of course, fell to David Lee Roth, who returned to the band after that. But I'm going to ask you, since we're a paranormal show, and we talk about UFOs, and you're interested in time travel and such, and some people think that maybe we're being visited by time travelers from the future, or from the past, you never know, from Atlantis maybe. Do you think that maybe UFOs, the pilots, are from other times?
Sure. Personally, I have come to the conclusion that they may be coming from the future. They may be coming from the past in this timeline. But then I believe that they are also coming from the present, and that they could be coming from the past, the present, and or the future in completely separate dimensions, vibrations, or timelines, parallel worlds. I think that a lot of these people are intervibrational, interdimensional. That's my understanding, though, based on some of the conversations that I've had with experiencers and some of my own experiences, and from the science books that I occasionally read, because I am a bit of a nerd myself.
Your personal experiences, what in those experiences led you to look at alternate dimensions or timelines?
Well, my dear, if I told you all of that, I'd have to kill you. I'm just kidding.
Then I'll go into an alternate time zone.
You will, and that would lead us to talk about quantum immortality. You have a deal.
Well, don't do it this year, but go ahead.
Sure. Essentially, almost all of my UFO experiences, the few that I believe I've had, seem to include a time slip, or perhaps you could say missing time, depending upon how you might want to look at it. And a lot of the other experiences that I've heard from other people report the same type of occurrence. And if we are experiencing something of a temporal disturbance here, this seems to me to say that there is some kind of temporal slip or disturbance elsewhere from the people who are initiating the contact. And of course, I don't really have anything solid to say one way or the other just from my own experiences. It's just my theory. But have you ever had missing time or a time slip, Gene?
I don't think so. Okay. I will tell you one story, though. Our original co-host for the show, David Biedney, sadly no longer with us. But back in 2006, 2007, he brings on a friend on the Paracast, and they talk about not missing time, but gained time. So they were driving from Boston to New York. It's a trip about 4 hours, give or take, depending on traffic. But they arrived at their destination in 2 hours. Now, you can say, boy, were they speeding, and they're lucky not to have been caught. But this is a very well-traveled route. And you can't speed very much, maybe a little bit, because you'd be in an accident. So how did they get from Boston to New York in 2 hours flat?
Yeah. I somewhat recently, have had a similar experience where I gained about 45 minutes of time one morning, and I didn't have any UFO or paranormal experience along with this gaining of time. The only thing out of the ordinary was that I was sick and I woke up late for my day. And then by the time I came out of the bathroom, I had gained a bunch of time.
Well, that's one way of not being late.
It is.
If you could do that, yeah, I can think of that. I have to be at the doctor's office at noon, but it's 11:55 and haven't left the house yet, and it's a 20-minute drive. And I suddenly go into the bathroom and come out, and it's really 11:15.
I wish that I could harness such a superpower. If anyone listening knows how to do this, we're all ears.
We'd never be late for an appointment again. You know the way doctors' offices work, especially in the U.S., they give you a 15-minute window to be late. Then they cancel your appointment. If you miss the appointment, they charge you a missed appointment fee, unless you beg or borrow or something, and they won't do it. So, but on the other hand, you get to the doctor's office on time or earlier, and you wait an hour because the doctor's busy, and they can't schedule the doctor in a way that they could efficiently treat people very shortly after they arrive. Basically, they can get away with it being late. You can't be late. I'm not saying negative things about doctors. It may just be the scheduling. They schedule too many or something like that. Gene, Tillie, Tim, you're in.
Oh, the Paracast.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
This is Jerome Clark, author of the UFO Encyclopedia and other books. You're listening to the Paracast.
Just to remind everyone here, if you're listening to the Paracast, we recently switched our network structure with the end of the GCN network, as a result of which the timing is a little different for the main show. But the most important thing is we now have half as many commercials, and as you probably noticed, the audio quality is better. So those of us who were concerned about all the ads we ran on commercial broadcasting, that's no longer here. When we say better audio, fewer ads, we mean it. We're not playing games here. It's half as many ads. So we hope you appreciate that. We hope that those of you who gave up on us will be back. We're talking here about time. Time, see what's become of me. I'm not going to sing a Paul Simon song, he'll sue me. But the effects of time, missing time, gained time. Now, gained time is the most curious thing of all. With missing time, you can say maybe somebody blacked out or something. But gained time, how do you do that?
Right. I think that might be the biggest time mystery of all, at least for us puny little beings here in the 3D. I have a few small theories, but that's all it is speculation. What if I'm completely wrong? What if there's something completely exotic that we simply cannot understand here? But what do you think, Gene? How do you think that gaining time works?
I haven't a clue. The point being here is that I personally have not had gained time. All that I know about. Okay, I have not had that happen to me. The only weird thing was, of course, the case of the disappearing reading glasses. That's about it. None of that stuff. No missing time that I'm aware of, or maybe I didn't pay attention. But I tend to be a little obsessive about that, so I look at my watch a lot. I always have to have a watch on. Tim, what about you? Gained time or missing time? Has it happened to you?
Well, I have a story in our book, Weird Time. A couple ladies from Ohio that I interviewed who they had a UFO experience when they were coming back from Dayton on a shopping trip. And on their way home, they had an encounter with two UFOs. One of them swooped low over their car and caused the engine to die. And they said that during this time, the engine had just died. It was like in mid pulse, and then they said it was almost like it was frozen. They said that outside there was no sound. Everything was just dead, and which is a perfect description of Jenny Randall's The Oz Effect. Well, the UFO then just flew away, and they continued on their way home. When they got home, they found that they were there about a half hour early than they were supposed to be. So kind of like David and his friend, except David and his friend didn't have the UFO encounter. These people arrived way ahead of time, and the only thing that they could account for this was the UFO encounter.
Intriguing.
And you don't get a lot of gain time with UFO encounters. It's mostly missing time. Every once in a while you'll get one, but mostly it's missing time. And I've often wondered if some of these missing time accounts, because everybody, kind of like the general consensus is there was an abduction event taking place. Mm-hmm. And I wonder at times if that is actually what happened, if there isn't some kind of time manipulation taking place, and that the abduction, the so-called abduction, if it's then brought out by hypnosis, is an error, that the hypnotic session put that idea into their mind.
I wanted to bring up one thing since you mentioned that, which is our guest last week, Kevin D. Randall, who is very, very skeptical of the value of hypnotic regression in general and of bringing back memories in the UFO field, pointing to people who have been prominent in abduction research, like Bud Hopkins, of course, Dr. David Jacobs, and even John Mack, that the people they analyze tend to produce experiences that meet their expectations. So the expectation, to be redundant, is that they are, in their questioning, feeding the image or illusion to these people. How can you believe it? So that's an issue there. And then again, if someone's hypnotizing you about something, you may fabricate something just to please them.
I concur. I am extremely skeptical of anyone who claims that they are regressing someone in order to bring out memories, because the human mind is incredibly subconsciously impressionable. And aside from that, there have been too many recorded hoaxes, in my opinion, to take it seriously. And I've even known a very famous past life regressionist, and I just can't get myself past the skepticism to believe what they are saying, even though I've met and known someone who was famous for such a thing. There are just too many flaws in the logic, in my opinion, and in the execution, in my opinion, for it to seem fair and reasonable to me. And of course, I could be wrong. I could absolutely be wrong. That's just my take on it. But what about you, Tim?
Before Tim answers, what is the name of this famous person you're talking about?
I cannot give that information out. I'm so sorry. He would choke me.
No, he wouldn't. You're a nice person. We will not allow that. I will basically enter through the computer monitor and go to that person's home and grab them. I remember a TV show where they did that. This is Supergirl. It was on the CW. And Jeremy Jordan plays the computer nerd. And there's a scene there where the evil person dressed in blue, Laura Vandervoort's the name of the actress, and she reaches her hand into the TV monitor, and where he is seated in front of his computer, the hand comes through the monitor and grabs him by the neck.
Oh, no. You know, that reminds me of Freddy Krueger with the tongue coming through the telephone.
I love that movie. The first Nightmare on Elm Street. I love it.
Yes.
You see, what's unfortunate here, guys, is that I don't really dig the current slasher type movies, very explicit. I grew up with the Universal movies where you conveyed the sense of horror with gothic surroundings, great film styling, great camera angles, and terrific acting. You didn't have to show blood and gore. It wasn't necessary till Hammer Films came out in the 50s and redid all the traditional horror films. But now, of course, they had to show a Dracula movie with blood coming out of his mouth. Bela Lugosi didn't need blood out of anyone's mouth. Okay? When the Frankenstein monster killed somebody, you didn't see him bleeding. You didn't see the broken bones. You never saw any of that. If you look at the movie serials, all the movies from the 40s, for example, I was watching The Adventures of Captain Marvel, a character now known as Shazam, where everybody's getting beaten up. People being smacked in the head, knocked unconscious. They don't suffer from concussions. They're not bleeding as a result of being knocked across the room back and forth or tossed or thrown. No one suffered any physical effects. And then now, of course, with these movies, you have to show. You have to be realistic. If somebody is dead or dying, you see blood and gore all over the floor. And here's Tim, and here's Gene, and here's Tillie. More to come. You're in
the Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
Hi, my name is Richard Dolan. You're listening to the Paracast.
I, however, want to go back to time travel and talking about going from one time to another, which may be part of what gain time and missing time is all about. On a limited basis, we are time travelers. Or maybe because time is an illusion, and sometimes we lose that illusion, and we lose that perspective, and therefore things happen over which we have no control. There was a movie some years back, Tillie and Tim, I think Tim knows about the movie, maybe you do, called Arrival. Not The Arrival, which was a different one with Charlie Sheen. Arrival, with Amy Adams plays this linguist. And she is in contact with these beings called heptapods, 7 limbs, kind of like an octopus type creature. And they communicate across time.
I've not heard of it, but I am enchanted by the idea.
It's worth watching. Tim, did you see it?
Oh, yes. Yes. It's based actually on a short story, but the movie is fantastic. I highly recommend, Tillie, that you watch it.
Good to know. Well, then perhaps I will have to make a point of that this summer.
Now, in the chapter I wrote for the book that Tim and Sean did, my chapter was on pop culture because time travel is used so much as a device in pop culture. Of course, we go back to the H.G. Wells novel, The Time Machine, for example, where he goes to the future rather than goes to the past. We looked recently at a TV show called Legends of Tomorrow on the CW, where all these grade B superheroes, not the Superman and Batman, but the grade B ones, the supporting players, they go into a machine called Wave Rider, and Wave Rider travels through space and time. Do you remember that, guys?
Not me. No, not personally, but I also kind of grew up underneath of a rock. What about you, Tim?
Well, I've seen bits and pieces of that series, but the CW unfortunately was not available where I live. So I had to catch it then later on streaming services.
That's kind of sad. The CW had basically, ultimately, all the major superheroes except Batman. They had Batwoman instead. Superman was on there. They still have Superman and Lois, which is closing out its final season this fall. They had Supergirl. They had The Flash. They had Green Arrow. All these famous superheroes, they brought them in there, and they were actually pretty decent shows. I mean, with a TV budget, half-decent special effects, really, really good acting, and it was a lot of fun. It's too bad you didn't get to see it. Now, of course, what they're doing is killing them all off because they want you to go to the movies to see the next Superman, the next Batman, and give them billions and billions of dollars. But anyway, getting back to the time travel thing, of course, I guess the most famous time traveler in the universe is Doctor Who. Doctor Who is, yes, Doctor Who, character from another world who has, of course, the TARDIS. The TARDIS is a device that looks like an aging phone booth from Great Britain. Small device. You go inside, of course, you're in an alternate reality because it's huge. It's humongous. It's a kind of a spaceship and a time-traveling device. And then to make things more interesting, the actors who play Doctor Who basically give it up after a few years. It's a lot of work. So they have Doctor Who regenerate. So a new actor plays Doctor Who.
I love that concept because in a way it's kind of like incarnation or reincarnation. And
lately, of course, they've been more diverse, like the previous Doctor Who, Jodie Whittaker, the first woman to be Doctor Who. Now they've got a man who's black playing Doctor Who. The point is here, Doctor Who doesn't have to be a specific sex or race. He could be anyone, and therefore you have all sorts of possibilities. So I think that's good. That makes Doctor Who interesting. The other thing, however, though, is I think it's gotten repetitious in its old age. So I haven't watched it much lately.
How many years has it been on?
Since the 1960s.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So how many different versions can you see of these various villains?
Well, I would say at least 5, but no more than 1 million.
Well, what you talked about the TARDIS and how it's bigger on the inside than it is on the outside. We have stories of people who have claimed to have been inside, either landed or crashed or confiscated UFOs, who have said the same thing, that the insides not only tend to be larger than they appear on the outside, but there's also weird time dilation effects. They'll go inside and say that they've been inside for only a few minutes and come out and find that hours have passed.
Rip Van Winkle.
Yes, exactly. Look at all the fairy legends where there are mysterious manipulations of time.
You have to think also how close fairy legends come to UFO abductions.
I was just about to say that exact same thing. You read my mind, Gene.
I am here reading your mind. A mind's a terrible thing to waste. Go ahead, please.
Well, what do you think about that, Tillie? I mean, do you think that there is some kind of connection or just a coincidence?
Oh, 100%. I believe that all of these other types of people are deeply connected to each other, just like they may well be to humankind. Even in my own research and the reports that I've received from others, they match exactly what you were saying. And in fact, I had a longer running case where a young woman reported to me that she was having mysterious visitations from people from elsewhere, and that when she would enter their ship, you could say, that it was much bigger on the inside, and that you could say, walls would open up into different dimensions depending upon what these other people needed or wanted. And that also included times. The walls could open up into different time periods depending upon what was needed from those people. And I think that Bigfoot also has a quantum element to it based upon some of the cases that I've seen in the past. For example, when I was investigating a small woodland case one year, a gentleman was having escalating paranormal activity, and basically the last straw for him, as he explained it to us, was that he was out in the oak grove tending the forest chores for the day, and from about 50 feet away, if that, he witnessed a very large, muscular, reddish brown haired Bigfoot, somewhere between 7 and 8 feet tall, walk into, face first, an oak tree and essentially disappear into it, be absorbed into it. So I think that they are all connected. I think that we are all connected. And I think that there is a serious time travel or time element to possibly all of this. What do you guys make of that?
Well, the thing I worry about, and we'll get into more of that maybe in a future show, is that when you go back to the past, is there going to be that grandfather effect like they had, of course, in Back to the Future, where unless the Michael J. Fox character will be his parents together, he will not exist because he wouldn't have been born. You think about the concepts of changing the past, how that's impacted. And I'll get into more of that in our next segment with Tillie Treadwell and Tim Swartz, and sometimes even Gene Steinberg. You're in
the Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
Hi, this is Don Ecker, and you are tuned into the Paracast. Let me tell you what, you're going to hear stuff here that you probably won't hear anywhere else. Hear that, George Snorri?
When Tim does that particular kind of stinger there, it sounds as if he's caught in a time loop.
It does, doesn't it? Oh, goodness. But I agree with what you guys were saying about the echo and the time loop, basically. Tim's voice, I mean.
Well, I was talking there, of course, about changing the past. And that creates two possibilities. Number one is if you change the past, do you create a new timeline? Do you change this timeline, which could have impact while we have a Mandela Effect? Something in the past was changed, and therefore all subsequent events based on that cause different changes that we may remember from our previous perceptions. Somebody's changing time, somebody's screwing with it. The other thing, of course, is the legends and the pop culture. Like there was a movie and a TV show called Time Cop. And Time Cop has this organization from the future, and they go back through time to stop time travelers from messing with the time frame, the time zones. So therefore, you don't change the past. That, of course, was one of the big things about Legends of Tomorrow, the TV show, where they would go back through time to stop messing with time. And, of course, they're imperfect grade B superheroes, so they'd often mess things up. Of course, we didn't worry about that with Doctor Who.
No, we didn't. But, I would like to propose a more exotic idea. What if when someone, say, is going to the past from the future in any given reality, what if they're not actually going to that timeline's past at all? What if they are creating a whole new timeline where they can go and muck about as much as they please, and it doesn't touch the original timeline because they've created their own, you could say, pocket universe? Do you think that could be feasible?
So basically you're saying you can't change the present timeline. Any act you take that could impact it must of necessity create another reality.
That is my own personal theory, but what do you guys think?
Well, we get back to the Mandela Effect. That again is some kind of manipulation of time if things are like that. Or our perception of events is so imperfect that we individually live in different realities anyway.
Yeah. Tim, what's your take on it? If you have one.
Well, if you look at, say, like the theories of Dr. Michael Masters, who has been on the Paracast in the past, and we feature an interview with him in the book. He suggests that we live in what's called block time, which means that from the very beginning of the universe, the past, the present, the future has already existed. All right, it's a difficult concept for our puny little three-dimensional brains to get around, but that if you do travel to the past, it's because you have traveled to the past, and you can't change it because it already is. Same thing with traveling to the future. The future already exists. The past already exists. And you can't change it because it already is.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said, it's kind of it's a difficult concept for your head to get around. But, it's his idea that the UFO phenomena could be time travelers, not only people from our future, but possibly extraterrestrials as well. Everybody all kind of combining forces, because the time is open and you can bring in anybody that you want to. But again, the main concept is that you can go anywhere you want in time, and it's not going to create a grandfather effect because you were meant to go back or forward in time. It already has happened. It already will happen. It's happening right now.
I think that sounds perfectly plausible to me. And in a sense, that fits perfectly, I think, also with my own theory. Gene, what do you think, though?
I think I'm here to listen to everybody else's opinions.
A wise man, perhaps.
Well, there's also the possibility, and this is something that I speculate about in the book as well, that there are an infinite number of alternate realities that exist alongside of our own that may not be in the same rate of time that ours is. So say like an alternate reality that's alongside of our own could have the appearances of 50 years in our past. The next one over would be 50, appear to be 50 years in the future, or 2 minutes in the future, or 2 minutes in the past. And that a lot of these cases that we've talked about, on the show today, with missing time slips, you're not actually going into the past or the future, but instead you're slipping into these alternate realities. And, because of that, I mean, you don't ever have to worry about a paradox or a grandfather effect, because you're not really traveling through time.
I dig that. And I think that is reasonable. Gene, have you developed any theories over there yet?
Well, I kind of hope that we can't just go back in time and screw things up. I don't want to do what they did in Back to the Future. I don't want to do that because I have no idea the impact of any single step I take. Because if I do that, even swatting a fly could cause a problem, because otherwise that fly would go in front of someone's face while they're driving in their car and they get in an accident and would die. So you're changing an entire thing. The tiniest movement that you make, the most insignificant thing that you do, could cause tremendous repercussions on the other side. So I don't want that to happen. Of course, I can't change reality. Obviously, with fiction, pop culture, it's a great plot device, okay? Because it gives all these possibilities of looking at the impact of time travel. On the other hand, you have other things involved in time travel which are even more ephemeral, like there was a show called Travelers. And Travelers involved this group of scientists from the future who returned to the past to inhabit people's bodies, take them over. But they only pick people who would otherwise die. So they aren't ruining somebody's life. That person would be dead. So they go on living this other person's life to do something to change the future. But once again, you're going back with a legitimate purpose, not just trying to see what happened. You can't go back and change the Kennedy assassination or the death of John Lennon or Abraham Lincoln, because if you do, something else is going to happen.
Sure. I think that is a wonderful response and a very thoughtful one, Jean. This also, I think, brings us smoothly into the discussion around free will and how that interacts with time. So, I personally believe that every single decision a person ever makes is vitally important as any other. And Tim and I talked about this recently on an episode that he and I did together on my own show. Tim, would you mind giving some of your thoughts maybe about that? We can fill Jean in a little.
Before you do that, I'm going to do a break. A legendary station break. Tim, Jean, Tillie, you're in.
The Paracast.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
This is Micah Hanks of the Gralien Report, and you're listening to the Paracast, the gold standard of paranormal radio.
So, we're going to learn the secrets now of what Tillie Treadwell and Tim Swartz talked about on her show. Tell us. I'm sitting here with bated breath, and I have to get the bait out of my breath, so excuse me.
Yes, I do believe that, Tim, you were about to tell us your theories about how free will and time intersect.
That's the conundrum, isn't it? And, we were talking previously about block time and how everything is already set, that no matter what, it's already happened and is happening. And, of course, that bothers a lot of people with the whole aspect of free will. If the future is already set, then according to them, there is no free will, that we're just robots programmed to do what is set in space-time. But people like Dr. Masters, he says that if block time exists, then you still have free will, that you make the decisions that you're supposed to make. You won't make wrong decisions because you can't. And I'm still agnostic when it comes to block time and the block universe. Because I still speculate that the future could be more along the lines of probabilities rather than something that is already set in stone. And it's like I had discussed earlier about alternate realities that exist alongside of our own. It could be that these alternate realities are the product of past manipulations of time, that our reality is a lot more porous or loopy, or however you would want to describe it, and that there are things constantly happening in what we would call, the past and the present, that alters things and creates these divergent timelines. It's like Gene was discussing with Back to the Future. If you were to go travel to the past, you would be able to do pretty much anything that you wanted to. You could go and kill your grandfather and marry your grandmother, and it's not going to affect your original timeline, but it's going to create new timelines that you're going to go off on and probably never able to return to your original timeline.
Mm-hmm.
And that may be, the creation of these alternate realities that I was talking to. I was reading an interesting article not too long ago that was talking about wrinkles in space-time. That after the Big Bang, you had the expansion of the universe, but it wasn't a smooth expansion, that there are wrinkles in space-time. And it got me wondering whether or not all of these things that we have been talking about on today's show, missing time, manipulations of time, things like that, time slips, are because of these wrinkles in space-time. That in our three-dimensional reality, we occasionally, or maybe not occasionally, maybe it's really wrinkly, like like cotton dress taken out of the dryer, and that we're constantly bumping over these wrinkles, and it creates then problems, wouldn't be the right word, but these glitches in space-time. And most of the time, we don't perceive it because, again, we exist in a three-dimensional reality. And the times that we do kind of have an awareness about it, we tend to ignore it because it's not part of your normal day-to-day activities. Most people think weird things happen, and you're just like, well, I got to go pick up the kids.
Yeah, I am with you on that, and I largely agree with you. And it was really some type of consistent wrinkling in time and reality that would probably, I think, also explain why we're having all of these different interactions between the human reality and lots of other quantum realities.
Well, the question would be then, Tillie, is there a human reality, or are we all being involved in multiple realities, which is why things are so screwed up?
That also is a fantastic question. I don't have the answer to that, but I suspect that you might be right. And when I say the human reality, I'm really only talking about what the human person would process on a day-to-day basis. But what is that exactly? Not even I know. So I guess we're all mad here.
Well, I resemble that remark.
Yeah. In the best of ways, my dear.
Well, I certainly hope so, but I'm trying to think here, and we can get into more of this on the After the Paracast podcast for Paracast Plus listeners, and that is, are these mysteries things we're destined to solve someday, or are we going to just keep wondering what's going on with time?
Mm-hmm. That reminds me of quantum immortality. I think maybe that would be a good way to round out the show. What do you think?
Quantum immortality. Okay, well, we only have a couple of minutes left for this segment, but we can take that to the After the Paracast podcast, and this way we can sit back and spend time and talk about anything with any kind of language you want to use, unless they can sue us for it. There you go. Tillie Treadwell, please tell our listeners, if they want to know more about the things you do, where can they check out your work?
Oh, my pleasure, darling. I thought you'd never ask. For anyone who would like to join me on my Weird Walk Home, they can look up the Weird Walk Home on YouTube. You'll find a treasure trove of interviews and original content. That is a channel that Tim Swartz and I have put together just for you, my friends, and we would love to see you there. Beyond that, if anyone would like to contact me, they are most welcome to email me at talktillietomeme@gmail.com or theweirdwalkhome@gmail.com. Well, besides that, if they would like to meet me perhaps in person, I am on the keynote speaker and panel list for a national UFO convention and conference that will be coming your way in New York City this autumn.
Thank you. We look forward to that. Maybe you'll be going to New York. That sounds like fun. I grew up there. Anyway, you can find us on Twitter, now X, and Facebook, and from Threads if you look for the Paracast. Check branded merchandise at theparacast.shop. Now, the people at Cafe Press changed everything, so we're still fixing up the area, but you can order. We also offer the Paracast free of network ads, and with the exclusive bonus after the Paracast podcast for Paracast Plus subscriptions. You can check us out at theparacast.plus, theparacast.plus. Lowest rates ever, quick signups. What can you say? Tillie Treadwell, glad to meet you. Thank you for joining us on the Paracast.
You're most welcome.
The Paracast, featuring Gene Steinberg, is a copyrighted presentation of Making the Impossible Incorporated. Tune in next week for a new adventure in The Paracast.
At First Things First, our mission is early childhood, and it's more important to our state than ever. By focusing on the early years, we help Arizona's children reach their full potential. Quality early learning impacts more than the individual child. Schools benefit from more prepared students, businesses with more qualified employees, and communities with engaged citizens. Investments made in the early years today last for decades. Join the First Things First mission and learn more at azchildhoods.com.
Hi, Maricopa County. I'm County Recorder Stephen Richer. Pursuant to state and federal law, we're continually working to maintain updated voter rolls. We take our responsibility to ensure secure elections seriously, but we need your help keeping our voter rolls up to date. Visit beballotready.vote to check your voter registration status, especially if you have changed your name, address, or political party. Thanks for your help in keeping our voter rolls clean.